Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Tailgate Talk. We're your hosts, David and Nick. Nick, say hi to the people.
Howdy.
We just watched the second college football playoff rankings reveal. We're gonna go through them with you guys and let you know how they differ from what we've got. So, without further ado, I'll pull up playoff rankings. So, right off the bat, we've got Georgia after that dominating win against Tennessee at 1, followed by Ohio State. Michigan moving up to 3. TCU cracking the top 4 at 4. Tennessee drops to 5, followed by Oregon, who still has a chance to win the Pac-12. LSU with a big win against Alabama. Um, Southern Cal moving up to 8. Then we've got Alabama and Clemson dropping to 9 and 10 respectively, followed by Ole Miss and UCLA, and then Utah, Penn State, then a couple of ACC teams with North Carolina and NC State. Group of 5 representative Tulane, big matchup against UCF coming up this week. Texas having to play TCU this week. They're up to 18. Kansas State dropping to 19. And then you've got Notre Dame with that huge win against Clemson, dominating win. They're up to 20. Illinois falling this week to 21. Then UCF, power of the group of fives right there between Tulane and UCF. Then we've got Florida State, Kentucky, and Washington all cracking the top 25 this week. So, Nick, what do you think of these rankings? Where do you want to start?
Um, let's get the elephant out of the way. Clemson fell from 4 to 10. I think it's fair. I honestly thought it was going to be more. So I'm actually kind of pleased with where they are. I do think it's a little annoying that Alabama's in front of Clemson, seeing how they have 2 losses now and Clemson only has the one. I don't think people love to say Clemson hasn't looked good in their wins. I don't think Alabama's looked good in half of theirs either. So uh I do think that LSU was ranked a little too high last week, and that's kind of why you're seeing them at 7. Happy for TCU to get in the top 4, but I said it to my dad or our dad when you're eating dinner tonight that being at 10, there's still a shot. So season's not over yet for Clemson. So yeah, I mean, I think Ohio State, Michigan will sort themselves out. Honestly, you could have probably flipped Michigan and Ohio State, and you probably even could have put TCU all the way up there. But I think it would have been very hard for them to drop Ohio State without losing. And yeah, so
Yeah. Um, I'm looking ahead. If you're looking at Clemson's schedule coming up, um, if they can get by Louisville and um, Miami and South Carolina, that's setting up for a big matchup against North Carolina. North Carolina keeps winning, they can probably get into the this range here of 12 to 13, I'm thinking, for the committee. Helps bolster Clemson's uh schedule if they're able to get that win in the championship ACC championship. And I do think it gives them an outside shot, but I think for the Tiger fans out there, the focus has to be maintaining the home winning streak, finishing out the season strong, and then you let the chips fall where they may. I personally, I think that I kind of agree with having Alabama ahead of Clemson. I don't think Clemson's got the horses on offense this year to really seeing how well Notre Dame just kind of just put Clemson's offense to bed. I'm a little bit worried about putting them in a playoff situation against some of these top teams. Still going to root hard for them, hope that they can make it, but I'd be perfectly happy with it with an Orange Bowl. But I think that it's got to be week in, week out, and then you find out what happens because you don't know. There's a lot of football still left to play for those top teams. Happy for Florida State. I think they're a little bit low, but they're just getting in the rankings now. Um, but good for them. They're getting into it, and having a pretty good season. They're bowl eligible already. So I think it's a good season for Mike Norvell in year two. Notre Dame also with a huge win, jumping up to 20. They finished the season strong. They can play spoiler for a couple of these big time teams. They've got USC on their schedule. That's a big game coming up for USC that they'll need to win if they want to keep making their case for the Pac-12. Um, I'm looking at this top here, and I think really for the Pac-12, it comes down to Oregon and USC. Um, so if both those teams can go in with only one loss to the Pac-12 championship game, I think the winner of that likely is in over the loser of the Ohio State Michigan game. Um, so that's my thoughts there. With that, let's go ahead and go through our top rankings. Sound good, Nick?
Yeah, really quick before we do that, when you were talking about how North Carolina keeps improving to potentially bolster resume, do we start hoping that the team in Columbia can scratch these rankings? Is that
No, absolutely not.
do
Never.
okay? I was just asking a question
We don't
because
do that.
still
I
playing.
wanted South Carolina to lose every game coming up to us and be with 5 wins and needing to beat us to be bowl eligible. That didn't happen because they played Vanderbilt this past week. But you know what? I refuse to root for that team in Columbia. That's not happening.
I'm right there with you. I'm just posing. I figured I had to ask. Like, do we start? Do we kind of like
I
low
don't think that
key
they
be
do
like,
enough for us, really. Because
well, it's
even if
another
they
top.
they've
It would
got
be
what
another
they've got
top
two
25
games
win.
ahead of us, and one of them's probably like they've got 2 games ahead of us. Um, they're not going to get high enough that if we beat them that they're going to stay in. So that doesn't really help you in the end. I think you
Be,
hope for misery for South Carolina if you're a
be
Clemson
another
fan.
ranked win. I don't know. They have
For a
Florida.
week,
Well, they're not. You know what? Actually, you just said that if they do, they wouldn't get that high up. They played Tennessee, and we kind of need Tennessee to lose if we're gonna make a playoff run here. I'm just saying, like maybe one time can they do it? Just once. It's at the game against Tennessee's
just
in
one time be
Columbia.
cool.
Yeah,
Just
one
once.
time be cool.
Just one time.
I'm,
Can you just one time be cool?
I will never, ever, ever root for South Carolina. But if they can, if they can beat Tennessee, helping us out in the playoff and then getting ranked themselves, it's hard to not say that you would. Like, even maybe not openly, but subtly be like, okay, this is fine. Like, it's okay. They play Florida this week. Then they have Tennessee. Then they have us. I'm not. I'm just saying it's not the worst thing in the world if they win the next two. I'll put it that way.
With
And it
that,
hurt me to
here are
say
our top 10.
that.
So, Nick, you want to start us off with your top 10?
Yeah, Georgia's the best team in the country. They kind of proved that. Uh, dang, you put Tennessee at 9. Okay. Um, I had TCU at 2 because I think, and I dropped Ohio State below Michigan. I think that the claiming that the weather was the excuse is bullcrap. Um, both teams are playing in that weather. You're supposed to be the best team in the country according to your fans. Like, show it. They didn't do that. They were tied. I think they were tied at halftime with a 1-7 Northwestern team. That's only win was the opener in Ireland against Nebraska. Like, I'm sorry, that's just not. You talk all the time about Clemson being bad or looking bad. Ohio State didn't look good, plain and simple. And Michigan and TCU look good, so I reward them, punish the Buckeyes. Tennessee, I mean, they had a rough week. Oregon keeps moving up. USC keeps moving up. LSU kind of had to put them at that 8th spot, followed by UCLA. And the reason I have Clemson at 10 and Alabama's not in the top 10 is because I do believe that Clemson should be ranked ahead of them. But I didn't think Clemson deserved to be number 9. So I think that's why I have it that way.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Georgia's the best team in the country right now. Ohio State, a very dangerous team. Um, they ended up inserting their will against Northwestern. Like I felt like once they went up a score against Northwestern, I felt like that game was kind of over. Um, so I've got them 1-2. I've put TCU ahead of Michigan. I think the TCU's played better teams than Michigan so far. But Michigan, you're in the top four, winning, you're in kind of deal. And then the way that I structured this is I was starting to look at who's got the best chance to get to add in a conference championship, which is why I've got the three Pac-12 teams that are all bottled up there with one loss. Oregon, USC, and UCLA. I think that they've all got a reasonable shot really to win the Pac-12. And I think the winner of the Pac-12 is likely in. I think you're going to have four different conferences this year. I think you should
Which,
with how the
yeah,
season's gone. And then I
which
put LSU
I
ahead of
think
Tennessee, even though I know Tennessee crushed LSU. I realize that. Again, I'm kind of looking a little bit forward on this, thinking that LSU right now has they're in the driver's seat in the SEC West. They have the shot to play Georgia. And my point is that I don't think that I think Tennessee, with the way that they looked, doesn't I don't want to see a rematch of that with Georgia, 1v4. I think that, you know, there's a lot of talk come from Tennessee that neutral site going to be different. I heard that they thought that Athens was going to be nothing. Playing through the hedges was no big deal. So if you're going to talk all that crap before the game and then let it affect you the way that they did, the undisciplined, pre-snap penalties and everything, I feel like Tennessee's, when they're hot, they're great, but they're not going to be able to stand a candle to Georgia or Ohio State, I think. And so that's why I'm putting them down out of the running, really. Because I think even Ole Miss has a better shot of winning the SEC right now than Tennessee. So that's kind of where my thought process is there. Um, and then I've got Ole Miss at 10 because I didn't think that Clemson, Alabama, with the way that Alabama's played this year and really with the way Clemson looked this past week, I didn't think they should be in the top 10. I think they're right on the fringe. I think that there's clearly the playoff committee thinks that Clemson can make it in. But I think that until Clemson's offense can figure itself out, I don't think that they're in the top 10 right now. I think that they get shellacked by some of these teams. And that's a hard pill to swallow as a Clemson fan, but I'm gonna be honest here. Like I'm a little bit worried when we decide in the wind not to give the ball to Will Shipley. I think that's a fundamental issue. They can remedy it. They'll be in the top 10 next week, one way or the other. For me, if they win against Louisville, because you've got LSU and Ole Miss playing. And so
Ole Miss plays Alabama, I
winning,
think.
winning, winning, it'll work itself out. But I think Clemson really hurt their playoff chances. So for me, the top 8 have the best shot to win to get into the playoff, and then from then on, it's a cluster.
Really quick, you just to make sure that we're giving the right information out. Alabama's playing Ole Miss this week. Not Ole Miss already played LSU and lost.
My bad.
It is your bad. LSU plays Arkansas. Moving on. I got Ole Miss, then Bama. It didn't matter which one was where for this week because they play, so that'll get sorted out. I fixed Utah. I realized I don't know what happened last week. I really don't know. I was just as confused as probably everybody watching, but Utah is not a top 10 team, but they are number 13 in my opinion. Carolina rolling up to 14. They look. I think it's going to be a fun matchup in Charlotte. Did they clinch it? Is it official?
Yeah.
So that'll be a fun matchup in Charlotte. Tulane riding the wave. Penn State. I still don't think Penn State's good. NC State at 17. They're starting to figure things out. Starting to make a little bit of a move upward again. Liberty. Went into a great. I wanted to pick them last week. I should have picked them because they looked great against a tough environment in Arkansas. Texas coming back at 19, and Notre Dame. I feel like you could rate them higher too. I think 20 is a good spot, but I feel like they could make an argument for like 18, 17. They look good. If it weren't for the fact that they lost to Marshall and Stanford, I think they'd be. I mean, at that point, they'd have one loss to Ohio State. They'd be in the top 10 easy. So, inexplicable how they lost to those two schools and then turn around and beat the crap out of Clemson. But thanks Notre Dame for that. So yeah,
Yeah. Look at Alabama ahead of Clemson. I think right now, if they played on the field, I think Alabama is probably going to beat Clemson just because of the quarterback situation and the offensive play calling. UNC, I'm high on at this point. I think that, they've got one of the top three quarterbacks in Drake May with the way he's playing. So I think UNC's got a good argument themselves. They're only lost to Notre Dame right now, as well to make it into the playoffs. So I think either or, if depending on how Clemson UNC finish out the season, if they can continue to look strong, I think they can make an argument to make the playoff. Tulane up at 14, Penn State at 15. Let's give NC State some credit where credit's due. I think Nick and I both had them out, down for the count. We were ready to move on to basketball season for NC State with Devin Leary going down. And I think they found themselves a quarterback
Malik
for at least
Morris
for the
is
rest
his
of the
name,
season.
right?
I don't know what's going on with Leary for next year, but NC State looking good again. I think, starting to solidify themselves, especially with the way that Wake Forest is sliding. Um, I think NC State's doing a good job. Give them some credit.
It would.
Texas, big matchup against TCU this week. Liberty, wish I picked them. Wish I picked them. They are they're Hugh Freeze has them going in a good direction. I'm curious to see if he'll stay or if he'll get a Power Five job next year. But right now, Liberty is playing really, really well. Um, Florida State got him at 19. Honestly, the more I watch Florida State, the more I think that they're figuring it out. They played what I thought at the time, with the way that Wake Forest was rolling, they played the three best teams in the ACC, lost by one possession games in each of them. Showed a lot of fight in the Clemson game. So I've been high on Florida State for a minute. Um, that's why I've got them at 19. Um, just because I think they have better losses than Notre Dame. Um, but Notre Dame is looking really, really good, and Notre Dame's going to keep trending upwards, I think, with the way that they're going. So I got them at 20.
Before I talk about my 21 to 30, I find it awesome that I had Utah at 13 and you have a 21.
I'm not
All
high
right,
on the Utes. I really am not. I don't I struggle with them so often that I just keep kind of I keep looking at other teams. I think other teams I'd pick over them, and so they just keep sliding.
well, you're dropping them after they win, so crazy. Anyway, UCF 21, Illinois. I feel a little vindicated on Illinois. I didn't think that they were number 14 in the country worthy, so it was nice to be right. I'm on the right side of history here. Washington, Florida State, again, two teams that have had pretty good seasons. They've had a tougher schedule and they've done what they needed to do. So they're interchangeable for me. Honestly, I could have, like, for all the reasons you just mentioned too, I could have put Florida State at 23 instead. Kansas State, tough game this week. Coastal Carolina at 26. I impressive win over App State. I think to clinch or not to clinch the Sun Belt East, but the just to kind of solidify themselves in the driver's seat for that. Wake Forest, they need a band-aid. They need to they need to do something.
They got a boo boo.
NC, Kentucky, and Baylor. I mean, you could have put any teams in the 28 through 30. I know Kentucky has had an up and down year. I think they're either ranked in the AP or they're ranked in the. I'm not sure. I thought maybe they're not right. I don't know. You could solidify any team in the 28 through 30. Like you could. I don't think that Oklahoma State should be there though. So that's where I'm going to call you out there. They are not good. They fooled us.
Yeah,
So.
they're slipping for me. I think that, I'm not as high on Baylor or Cincinnati. I'm kind of wishing that I put Coastal where I put Syracuse. The more I think about it, um, so I think those
Right.
like Coastal's probably my 31 right now, and I probably should have put them at a little bit higher. But I think next week probably I'll have Oklahoma State out of there. Um, yeah, I did this. I also did these rankings like the day after, so I had a little bit of salt in the wound with Clemson and everything else, and probably wasn't thinking straight. So these last 10 were hard for me to kind of differentiate. I feel like once you get from 21 to like 35, whatever
Exactly.
the all these teams you see here, you can kind of throw them in a bag and chuck them out, and they'd all kind of, end up in the same area. So it's nuts. That's the thing I think that's nuts though, is that um this year it feels like college football is just chaotic to an extreme. It feels like it's so volatile. You've got teams week in and week out looking completely different. Like look at how Wake Forest has fallen off. Look at Clemson against Notre Dame this week. Look at Alabama, struggling to beat a Texas team with a backup quarterback, struggling against a Texas A&M team who has completely fallen off a cliff. Um, then losing two very tough. They do that against teams that I think are struggling. And then you look at their two losses to Tennessee and to LSU on the road to both those places, hard environments. And both those teams needed a last second walk-off play, whether it was a field goal or the 2-point conversion to win that game. So Alabama confuses me at times. The only team, and then you even with Georgia, you've got Georgia playing with their food, so to speak, with like Missouri and Kent State. Um, I really don't feel like any team has given, a perfect season so far, which is awesome because it makes this type of conversation a lot more fun uh and interesting. And you could even make that argument if we go back to our rankings that, Clemson I have down at 12 could make the playoffs still. Or, for the committee that's at 10. I think it's week in, week out, you don't know what's going on.
I did just to kind of talk more about the 2-point conversion plays. Uh that Alabama LSU game, that 2-point conversion that LSU ran looked a little familiar, didn't it?
Oh yeah.
You think, Bam?
I think Saban's still calling it a pick.
Oh my gosh, that was we were
How
watching
about
that
that though?
game.
This is going to be the first time in playoff history that we're trending towards neither Clemson or Alabama being in the playoff. Since its inception, at least one of them has been in the playoff every year.
Yeah.
And
Honestly,
we're
it's
right
good for the
now we're in a
sport.
position. I mean, Alabama doesn't control their fate. They need LSU to lose twice. They need to beat Ole Miss this week. Like, and
Honestly,
honestly, I'm looking at LSU's schedule. I don't think LSU's losing twice. They've got
Arkansas and
Arkansas
A&M.
this week, and they've got A&M. I think they're winning at least one of those games.
I also don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. Ole Miss beats Alabama in Oxford this week. I think that could very well
Yeah,
happen. So, oh God, I would love that. That would make me so happy. Come on, come on, Lane, bring it home.
we're jumping on the lane train this week, huh?
Jumping on the Lane train. Oh man,
And
that
I
would be
want to pull up
great.
there's a lot of talk about dynasties being over, with some media heads, mostly directed towards Clemson. Although I think some still saying, look at this is the worst team that Saban's had. What's going on here? Does he know how to deal with NIL deals? This is it's interesting to see how both those teams respond this week,
Yeah,
um, after brutal losses. So, well, for different reasons. So, there's a lot to still play for when it comes to college football. I think that the rankings that I have right now, I only feel good about the first like 8 picks, and then after that, I don't know what the heck's going on.
yeah, it's
So,
and that's honestly the fun part of college football is all the chaos. So,
mhm. So, well, guys, that's what we've got for this week. Let us know what you think. Roast me for putting Clemson so low and having no idea what to do with my bottom 10 teams. Give Nick a little pat on the back for finally figuring out where to put Utah.
Yeah.
So, but as always, guys, go Tigers.
Go Tigers.